currently not. Live.
Be live now.
Yeah, we're live. Good afternoon. I declare this meeting of Glamorgan Spring Bay Council open at 2:06 p.m. on the 23rd of July 2024. Apologies for the late start due to some IT issues.
The Glamorgan Spring Bay Council acknowledges the Tallowa people, the traditional owners of our region, and recognise their ancient and continuing connection to land, water. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and
Thank you. Welcome to councillors and staff. All councillors are present at agenda item 1.1. There are therefore no apologies or leave of absence required at 1.2. In attendance today, we have the General Manager, Mr. Greg Ingham, the Director of Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Peter Forge, Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Alex Wood, Director of Corporate and Community, Mr. Lise Blaine, and our Executive Officer, Mrs. Jasmine Kerr. Agenda item 1.4 is late reports. General Manager, I understand we don't have any late reports. Thank you. Agenda item 1.5 is the declaration of interest or conflicts. As Mayor, I request elected members to indicate whether they have, one, any interest personally or via a close associate, as defined in section 49 of the Local Government Act, or two, any conflict as described in Council's Code of Conduct for councillors in any item included in the agenda. Deputy Mayor Simons.
I'll declare an interest in 8.6.
Thank you. Any others? I will be declaring an interest in agenda item 8.9, the Spring Bay Community Food Hub, and I will leave the chamber and request the Deputy Mayor to chair the meeting for that. Agenda item 2 is the confirmation of minutes. The meeting on the 25th of June, there is a recommendation on page 6. Councillor Woods.
I'll move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the council held on the 25th of June 2024 at 2 p.m. be confirmed as a true and correct record.
So seconder. Councillor Gregson, thank you. Motion, all those in favour? Those against? Item 2.2 is the special meeting of council on the 9th of June. There is a recommendation on page 7. Oh, 9th of July, sorry. Thank you, General Manager. 9th of July. Councillor Woods.
Thank you. I'll move that the minutes of the special meeting of council held on the 9th of July 2024 at 12 p.m. be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Is there a seconder? Queenie, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Unanimously. Item 2.2 is the date and purpose of workshops held. And recommendation here on 7, I think, page 9. 10. Thank you, Councillor Woods. Councillor McQueenie.
I move that council notice the information.
Is there a seconder? Edwards, thank you. Motion, all those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Item 3 is public question time. There is a question on notice at agenda item 3.1. The General Manager has provided a response there, and General Manager, I believe you may have some further information to add.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Mr. Peter Kuhn has, following his reading of the response on the agenda, has further elaborated on his original question, and with the Mayor's permission, as a question without notice, I'd like to just run a short statement to Council, and that can be included in the minutes as a record of an elaboration of my response. Council operates many departments within cost collections and also discrete projects enabling, I will forward this on to the Executive Officer, enabling suitable costings for such things as grant acquittals to funding partners. To date, Glamorgan Spring Bay Council has not established discrete accounts for capturing individual planning matter costs. To do so would be extraordinary given the number of planning matters handled by council. Resources within the planning department are accounted for as a department, not as a collection of individual projects. Whilst it is recognised that the matter in question is a significant one, accurate cost collection would need to have been established from the outset several years ago and in keeping with accounting system practices. No discrete accounting was established for that planning matter.
Thank you, General Manager. That providing the extra advice is appreciated. Agenda item 3.2 is questions without notice, and again, General Manager, I understand we have any questions without
That is
notice.
correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Agenda item 4 is the planning section under Regulation 25, the Local Government Meeting Procedure Regulation 2015. As Chairperson, I hereby declare Council is now acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the English Planning Act for section 4 the agenda. Councillor Young, I believe you were.
I just wanted to move the motion, but
Thank you,
you,
Councillor.
well, I move the motion that council now acts as a planning authority at 2 yes.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor McQueenie, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's against. It's carried unanimously. Agenda item 4.1 is FA 2024/0018 11 Sunrise Drive, Fishno, a two-lot subdivision. There is a recommendation on page 20. Okay, thank you.
I think I'll move that pursuant to section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, the Tasmanian Planning Scheme, Morgan Spring Bay, SA 2024/00018 at 11 Sunrise Drive, Bishno, CT 177160/81. A two-lot subdivision be approved with the following advice: conditions 1 through to 33 and advice A through to R.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Edwards, Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I'll just hear what other councillors have to say and reserve my right to close.
Certainly. Councillor Gregson?
On page 19, there is it says, a 72 metre square stormwater seepage trench is the rear of each lot. Now, can't see that was a planner's response. I can't see that in the conditions.
General Manager, I'll defer to Mr. Woodward or Mr. Bonner. Mr. Bonner, are you able to answer Councillor Gregson's question?
The plans show a stormwater trench that or a stormwater detention system that will be provided. There are conditions in there relating to confirmation of that will be adequate for the proposed use. So condition 2 now. Condition 16, the drainage stormwater report must be submitted along with engineering drawings demonstrating how stormwater will be managed within each lot. So we're basically requesting further information.
There it is under 8.63 of what you
Through the with regard to the responses to the application, I have some sympathy with the 450 metre square blocks that minimum. These two blocks are below that. And then the retort is that it does meet the criteria. In these circumstances, you have a situation where you look around at the different blocks surrounding this area, say, well, this may be small, this may be not, etc. Now, is this setting a precedent? So if these blocks are approved at less than 4 metres, 450 metres square, the next subdivision in that area, they'll look round in this particular area and say, look, these two blocks are
Councillor
under.
Gregson, can I interrupt you there? That's not a matter for consideration inside this planning matter. It is a matter because there is no precedent in planning. Each block has to comply with the planning circumstances around that particular block, which is what we're dealing with here now.
Right. It just might be, I would rephrase that. I'll say, well, this, if this is approved, the next subdivision will go ahead because of these two lots being under 400.
Madam Mayor, if you don't mind, I can just provide a brief comment. I think on page 16 of the report, that aerial photograph does provide some context, and if it was expanded out further, some context of the local environment, and you can see there has been historically fairly intensive development on blocks within that area. This proposal is in keeping with that. It's not it's not a large size subdivision. It's only 2 developments on an original block that's been proposed here. So I don't believe it would set any precedent.
If I may, General Manager, it can't set a precedent in planning. I'm looking at Mr. Woodward and Mr. Bonner. We can't set, this is not going to set a precedent in planning in the big scheme of things, because these blocks have to abide by the planning scheme in accordance with your assessment.
Yes.
I've got that right, haven't I? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Georgia.
I take on note the representator's concerns and also the responses from our officers. And I feel for the representatives because everybody's cheesed off when the planning scheme changes or when the rules change and we thought something is going to be. And I can understand that, but the fact of the matter is, if the scheme has changed and the performance criteria is met, it is not in our remit, I wouldn't have thought, to be able to say no, because it's our planning officers have said it meets the criteria. I feel sorry for the representatives, but it's, in my opinion, that's just how it's going to be. That's planning.
Councillor Churchill.
This is actually, I find this quite an interesting case. And once again, it's what's wrong with the planning scheme. Now, I look at this and I can see this block that went through last year, I think it was April last year, it's the DA for a house on 800 plus square metres. Right? So that went through, and I can understand that the neighbouring properties and other people who might have wanted or thought about it, thought this is all fine. We've got an 800 square metre block here, which is about consistent with the rest of the blocks around the place. The range of block sizes there is listed as between 600 and 900. This one's 840 odd. It's not 900, but it's 840 odd. So that went through as a DA with no need for representations from the community. You know, they were quite comfortable with that. And I think if I was a neighbour, I'd be quite comfortable with that too. However, now, 12 months later, they've decided that they wanted to make that into 2 blocks. And the original DA still stands. So if we'd been presented last year with that on a 400 square metre lot, which it is now, it's 402 square metres, that would have come to council because I feel that we would have had representations against it. So, you know, this is playing with the planning scheme, and the planning scheme's allowing this sort of, I'll call it an anomaly. I'll be very polite, but that's what it's doing. It is yet again something that's wrong with the planning scheme to say that this can occur, but now the representations have gone in, and I can understand why, because it is, and I guess this is where I differ from the General Manager's opinion on this. These lots are a lot smaller than any of the others. The next lot size up from the 400, which is under the acceptable solution. The next size up is 600, right, which is well within the acceptable solution. So while this will, no doubt go through under the planning scheme, I think these anomalies need to be brought out. We need to push back on this sort of stuff so that a sensible solution would be, once again, acceptable solution, no performance criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Churchill. I don't think, I don't imagine there's too many elected members around this table or indeed around any local government table. It's around the day planning decisions at the moment. Could speaker for or against the motion? If you need, you wish to close the vote?
Yeah, look, I was closing saying that I absolutely understand councillor Churchill's views on that matter. That's quite right. Yes. I suppose if there are any pluses in this, it is that it's not common throughout that subdivision. It allows for some level of affordability for the people who are trying to develop a house there. It may allow someone to build there that potentially might not have been able to because of the cost plan. And I suppose the other thing you've got to be wary of is there are other things other than the planning scheme which can affect the amenity of neighbours. It's not all about the block size, and sometimes potentially we lose sight of that. So, so we're receiving my support for that. Because of the officer's support, because it does meet performance criteria.
Thank you. You've closed debate. Deputy Mayor Snell, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Gregson, councillor McCready and councillor Churchill are against. Thank you. Under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015, as chairperson, I hereby declare that council is no longer acting as a planning authority for the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, so section 4 of the agenda. Is a recommendation. Councillor Churchill, please.
I move that council no longer acts as a planning authority at 222.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Gregson, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Unanimously. Item 5 is the financial reports. There is a recommendation on page 31. Deputy Mayor?
I will move the officer's recommendation that council receives and notes the interim financial statements as attached to this report for the period ended June 2020.
Seconder, please. Councillor Woods, thank you. Any questions, comments?
No.
Questions or comments from councillors? Financial. Thing? Yes, certainly, General Manager.
I'd just like to thank everyone in this room, basically, who've all contributed to this outcome, end of year outcome. In again, a challenging year around finances generally, inflation and everything else that comes with it. We realise that obviously, especially during our budget deliberations, but next year. But I just want to thank everyone and the main players are in this room that have contributed to this outcome, including Director of Corporate and her team.
If there are questions or comments, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. There are no section 24 committee reports at agenda item 6. Agenda item 7 is the information report. 7.1 is our Director of Works and Infrastructure's report. There is a recommendation on page 38. Councillor Young.
Notes the information.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Churchill. Thank you. Any question or comment, Councillor Young? Any other questions or comments from councillors? Councillor Gregson, thank you. Chair's report.
I don't have a problem with locating the addresses, for instance, on page 35, public amenity wastewater issues at Harold Street. I have a clue where Harold Street is. And there's the
Councillor
no.
Gregson, can I just say, I did note in here that Mr Porch went to great pains to put the areas after it. I think that one may have just been missed in the big scheme of things. Harold Street is in Coles Bay.
Oh, right. Right. And also the Pelican walkway. I don't know where the Pelican walkway is.
Pelican Walkway is Tribana.
Right.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm answering questions to you, Mr Porch, sorry.
So I'll just give you
Let's try that.
examples here. But it'd be fantastic if it was Pelican Walkway at Tribana or Harold Street, Coles Bay, that'd be
Yes.
sort of for people reading it as a public record and as the minutes.
And as I said, Councillor, Mr Porch is well aware of that request and will take great pains to improve in the next report. But having said that, I would just like to thank him for his usual very good report. Any other questions or comments in relation to the Director of Infrastructure's report?
Second question.
Councillor
I had a constituent. He was a bit concerned about the dog tax, and he had a non-D6 dog. So what's the difference in expenditure as far as registering a D6 dog and a non-D6 dog?
General Manager, you've got an answer.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. If the councillors okay with that, Councillor Gregson, we'll discuss that matter in the next report, which is the Planning and Development Information Report.
Any other questions or comments in relation to Mr Porch's report? Nothing further. Voting all those in favour? Against, it's carried unanimously. 7.2 is the Director of Planning and Development's report, Mr Woodward. There is a recommendation on page 41. Thank you.
I move that council receives and notes a report on the activities of the Planning and Development Director. Area.
Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Edwards. Thank you. Councillor Woods, do you have any comment?
Just to say again, it's good to have these reports in our agenda to see what's going on.
Absolutely. Any questions or comments? Now, General Manager, you were going to address Councillor Gregson's question in
Yeah.
relation to dog management.
So
Because
three,
can I just interrupt you and say that I have actually had a couple of ratepayers approach me about not being able to, a pensioner not being able to register a dog as under pensioner rebate if that dog is not a D6 dog. If that's the crux of it. So address that or have Mr Woodward address it, it'd be great.
certainly to you, Madam Mayor, yes. Director, Mr Woodward will address those. As you know, animal compliance and dog control generally falls under the Planning and Development Directorate, so I will refer to Mr Woodward.
So dog registrations do not cover the costs that are associated with rights matters throughout the organisation. So it is funded as part of that area. So, under Council's dog management policy, it talks about Council will provide reduced registration fees for D6 dogs. This is in order to reduce the instances of unwanted or abandoned dogs, and also any non-D6 dogs that escape and then have litters, and then those litters are then placed into. So it is in order to encourage responsible dog ownership that D6 dogs receive a reduced.
What was that?
They are on council website.
Yes.
I don't have them with me, but I'm aware that our fees are significantly cheaper than Yes.
Questions or comments? Councillor Churchill, thank you, and then Councillor Edwards.
Just through you, Mayor, if I could ask the director, under the planning appeals, the 1100 Coles Bay Road, Dolphin Sands, whoops, Coles Bay. The address is right. Okay. It's Coles Bay. I just wanted to know where that planning appeal is up to.
Through you, Mayor, we've just received advice back from the ASCAT that the permit will be issued. So we'll be addressing that in the next day with conditions. So was approved by TASCAT, but we just had to finalise the conditions on the permit, and those conditions have now been finalised.
Councillor Churchill, do you have another question?
If I may just ask one further question there. Will we be able to get those changes to conditions?
Through you, Mayor. Certainly. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Young.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Woodward. Were there any cost orders made by the Tesco? Have they reserved the cost order? I'm just interested whether council was on the receiving end of an adverse cost order.
Through you, Matt, we have not received anything as yet. We only just received the advice.
Councillors, if I may, as you know, I declared an interest in this matter. When the question was asked, I did declare the General Manager to see if I should leave the room. It is simply, there was no decision to be made around this. It was simply an advice question. So I have remained in the room, despite the fact having declared a previous interest in the matter. Councillor Edwards.
I just want to go back to your question there. But do the pensioners get a discount if the dog isn't desexed? Because I feel that they should, because it's not cheap to get your dog desexed. Pensioner, you probably can't afford it.
Through you, Mayor. So discount will be offered to pensioners for one dog only, and that dog needs to be desexed.
Is that something we can?
The policy will be coming to council for review.
Yeah.
I believe that at this stage, it's consistent with the approach that other councils take, and because of the reasons that I outlined previously, and I guess that's the position of officers. Yes, but look, certainly, yeah, we'll present it to council, and council will have the ability to workshop that.
Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, where is the nearest vet?
For you, Madam Mayor, Sorrel is
Thank you.
the nearest vet. I believe that there is a vet that attends from time to time as well.
Is there any other questions or comments?
Just one. I was just going to make mention of our outdoor crew that have planted 980 plants and grasses on council reserves. That's fantastic. Well done. Thank you.
So, Mr. Woodward, whilst this is not addressed in your report, it does come under animal control, and I'm a little bit vague in the question I'm going to ask you. I saw something just recently about cat management and cats having to be microchipped and the like. Will that come under anything to do with council? Will we have any role in that under the animal control space?
Through you, Mayor, there is requirements now for cat. There was new cat legislation brought in a couple of years ago. That spoke about cats breeding and sale of kittens and the like. Council, it's not explicit in the legislation that council has a role to play in that, but it is the discretion of council how we do that. It does come down to resource and what we physically provide. We do provide advice and information on our website and council chambers. Not active in managing that.
When I saw the, if I may, when I saw the the content in the newsfeed, I thought, oh, here we go, something more for council to deal with. So General Manager has just written me a little note that says the Southern Tasmanian Cat Management Plan has guidelines around this. So
Great.
Thank you, General Manager. Further questions or comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to agenda item 8, which is officers' reports requiring a decision. Agenda item 8.1 is the 2024-25 annual plan. The recommendation on page 43. Councillor Woods.
Move that council adopts the 2024-2025 annual plan as attached to this report.
Is there a seconder? The chair, thank you. Councillor Woods, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I'll reserve, thank you.
Thank
For
you.
closing. I'll reserve.
I'll reserve for closing. Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments? Or against? Councillor Churchill?
I'd just like to thank the staff for pulling that together. I think it's given us a good idea of what we hope to achieve over the next year. And it's laid out in a way that I think community should be able to easily understand and to be able to see things that have started, where we're going to and what we hope to achieve. I think it's a really good report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Churchill. I endorse that. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Woods, do you wish to close the debate? Or...
Well, Councillor Churchill took the words clean out of my mouth.
Okay.
However, I would like to thank the staff for what they've done with regards to this. And I like it because it's really easy to read.
Yes.
It's not arduous. It's not a long document. It's quick, easy, done. Thank you, staff.
Thank you.
Sorry for just butting in again, Madam Mayor. I just again want to thank and I concur and pleased to hear the councillor's comments. This plan is a continual, like most of our documentation, it continues to evolve and improve as our documentation should. And it certainly has been improved along the lines of the fact that it's a public document commonly read by, hopefully, read by our community, and it's a good read, easy to understand. I'd like to thank again the directors in this room who have had significant input into this, and in particular the executive officer who pulled it all together. It really is a good reading document, and we're very proud of it.
Congratulations to all. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? As against? It's carried unanimously. Agenda item 8.2, Councillor McCready.
Yes. Yes, Mayor. I move that council will consider a request for approval under the covenant in question if it is presented with the particulars of the proposed structures buildings proposed to be developed on lot 1 south of line marked A to B of sealed plan 169414.
So I need a second. Seconded. Councillor Gregson. Councillor McCready, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do. I've got an original piece to read, and it's not extensive, but it is long. I believe that the community expects us to act fairly, considering natural justice and transparency. This is an unusual matter, and I believe that there are a number of key things that need to be carefully considered in making our decision. 1, the nature of the covenant and our obligations regarding it. 2, the options that are available to us, given those obligations. And 3, council's involvement in this matter to date and community confidence. So first, in terms of the nature of the covenant and our obligations, at its simplest, a covenant exists that council is not a party to. Covenant benefits and binds the 4 parties at the Revan Road address. The covenant relates specifically to restrictions on buildings and structures. That is, to quote the covenant, not to build any building or structure south of the line marked AB on the plan unless approved by the Glamorgan's Bay Council. Council's involvement with or obligations regarding the covenant is limited to considering requests to lift the operation of the covenant with respect to buildings and structures sought to be developed on the restricted areas. Put simply, the application essentially asks Council to grant, in my view, an ambit approval to potential future development of buildings and structures on the land without any knowledge of particulars of the buildings or structures, its siting, its form, or its materials, as it may expect to see. Council, acting as planning authority, has yet to see a subdivision development application. So as to the available options for us, beyond the recommendation provided in the published agenda papers, we have been presented with advice that Council could take the position that reflects the motion I've just moved. In terms of history, I think it's important that we consider Council's engagement on this matter so far in terms of meeting community expectations for fairness and natural justice, including, really importantly, the due consideration of the views of other parties to the covenant, let alone perhaps even additional parties such as those who share a boundary for the lot that's in question. Earlier this year, the applicant applied for a covenant to be lifted under the Local Government Building and Provisions Act, Miscellaneous Provision Act, or an amendment to the sealed plan. Without going into too much detail about the Act does set out a process for dealing with an application, including contacting all relevant parties, and in this case, that's people who are party to the covenant. It sets out general decision-making arrangements and avenues for those who believe they've been disadvantaged by the subsequent decision. Essentially, it ensures a level of justice, natural justice or fairness, and embeds conflict resolution in the arrangements, as one might expect where decisions are being made that relate to multiple parties. As part of managing the original application we received under that Act, Council contacted parties to the covenant to seek their views. Parties advised us that they were not supportive of the requested change. The applicant subsequently withdrew from the process under the Act and has submitted a direct application. This approach does not require Council, does not require a process where Council is required to consult with or gain the agreement from the parties to the covenant, unlike the prior process. So, in considering our decision, if we, in my view, as a third party to the covenant, grant the applicant's request, rather than what's outlined in the motion I just moved, we do so as only a third party to the covenant, ahead of receiving any application or detail of particulars relating to specified building or structures or proposed building or structures. We do it having specifically actually sought advice from the other parties and having received advice that they are not in support of the request. I would suggest that having been asked, we have now, by Council, we have now created a reasonable expectation that Council would consider their views, which they've expressed. By adopting an alternate process that does not afford the other parties any formal process, by having their views, having their views considered, we've deviated from the expectation that might have been created. I believe that to approve an application in that context where there is an appropriate alternative approach falls short of what our community expects in terms of fairness, natural justice and transparency. I'm not sure that supporting the applicant's request, I'm also not sure that supporting the applicant's request wouldn't be viewed as prejudicial and perhaps draw Council into possible expensive proceedings should any of the parties to the covenant decide to progress legal avenues available to them. In summary, we are making this decision in the knowledge that what is being requested is contested. The community has a right to fairness, natural justice and transparency in our decision making. We have advised that the motion I have put satisfies the requirements or obligations of council in this instance. It focuses, on the nature of the covenant itself. There are well-established transparent arrangements for development, including opportunities for other parties to engage in those processes that guide, when it comes to our role as planning authority, decision-making. And as such, I put the motion.
Thank you, councillor McQueenie. Councillor Young, could you just give me 2 seconds, please? Councillor McQueenie, in your statement, you said you have advised that the motion you've put is fine, or I'm not sure what the words were you used. I have some concern around that because as an elected member, I've not seen that advice from our officers in relation to it.
We've been provided with that advice. It's the legal advice that we were provided with. Reflects one of the clauses.
Right, okay, thank you. Thank you. But as you would appreciate, our council agendas, we have section 65 plus, and I'm just trying to run everything out. Councillor Young, you had a question.
I didn't have a question. I want to make a statement.
Sure.
This matter has concerned me a lot. It's not simple, and I've agonised. I've mentally gone this way and that. And one of the principal things that I consider, it's not the primary thing, but it's a principal thing, or one of the principal things, is if we pass a motion relating to the covenant, will it incur council in any form of financial liability? And that's a bit of a guess. The historical thing that I think is relevant is the fact that council consented by signing the schedule of easements by its an earlier general manager under delegated authority to the schedule of easements that contained the covenant. It was under an old field plan that existed at the time. The covenant probably wasn't signed with the effect or otherwise of the planning scheme that existed then. But it did exist then. Since that signing of the schedule of easements by our former general manager and the submission of it directly or indirectly to the Land Titles Office, it became a covenant that had force of law. Subsequent to that covenant coming into existence, there has been a new planning scheme. And the new planning scheme sets out what can and can't be done in various parts of the municipality. There's been no local provision schedule relating to this particular land. And one of the things that the applicant, I suppose you could call him, that seeks council to act, and the council to act under request to give consent to building pursuant to the covenant that council has been saddled with its prior knowledge, is a matter that council has to act upon. It has to consider the application itself. You can't ignore it because it would be in dereliction of its duty. But there is now a new planning scheme. There are no local provision schedules. So one assumes that if there were specific requirements back in the days when the schedule of easements was signed by a former general manager and lodged with the Titles Office, those specific requirements have been overridden by the current scheme. And we have a position, and I to note that there is concern by one objector at least that says by removing the covenant and potentially allowing the subdivision and therefore future house or houses on each of the lots, we believe that this will impact upon our privacy and particularly on our open space at the rear of the property. Now, any building on a land next door will impact upon a view. It's not suggested by the objector that there's some special flora or fauna matter to be considered, that a council might consider that saying will consent provided the development application complies with the current planning scheme is a sufficient exercise of its consenting or otherwise power under the covenant, because the whole game has changed. There's a new scheme. And my concern is that this proposed motion imposes obligations upon the person that owns the land that is subject to the covenant to onerous obligations that, bearing in mind the current state of the planning scheme, happen to be too onerous.
Councillor Young, could I interrupt you? As you know, under the meeting procedures, there is a 5-minute limit, and I think you're close
If
to it.
you want to go.
Could I ask you to?
I understand, Madam Mayor. I've finished.
You finished? Thank you. Councillor Edwards, did you have something?
I think that the officers have put together a very comprehensive report, and I take on board the natural value assessment submitted to the subdivision application. Did not find any threatened flora or fauna species on the subject site. That's not in dispute by anyone. So it appears to me that it's a covenant that has been put on in the past and now holds no value as far as flora and fauna, which the covenant was originally provided to address. And there's no threatened species or anything within, was it 100 metres, I think I read. I believe the only cost to us would be if we got these things back. To me, it appears as the tentacles of bureaucracy are trying to stick their noses into every little bit of business that everyone does, and we choose to go against our officers' comprehensive report and comprehensive motions at our own peril. I'm not quite, have 3 motions here looking at regarding this. I've got no clue which one we're at now, to be perfectly honest with you. I read the one I read in the documents we received initially. It seemed perfectly sensible to me. So where we go to, which motion we're at, I'm not quite sure, but we've just got to butt into people's business.
Thank you, Councillor Gregson, then Councillor Woods.
Through the mayor, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Quinn, isn't it? And also, and the cogent remarks by Councillor Young. I think Councillor Young's reservations will basically be played out through Councillor McQueen's approach with this motion. So that will be taken into account through due process. Councillor McQueen has had an inclusive vision, and everyone's going to have a say. So, and I think when people feel as if they've been heard, they find it quite liberating, really, even if the decision doesn't go their way. Now, I think it's vitally important that people are heard and have their say. So I'll be backing Councillor McQueen.
Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may direct my questions through you to all.
No.
Early on in Councillor McQueenie's words, there was obligation to the covenant. In all the years that I've sat on council and had to deal with covenants, we've been informed that we can't take the covenant into as part of the decision. Like it's really null and void, a covenant to us as a planning authority. And so therefore, as far as the obligation to the covenant, we really don't have an obligation to the covenant. Is that correct? Would agree?
Through you, Mayor.
Thank you,
So
Sean.
when acting as a planning authority, covenant doesn't play a part in your assessment of your planning applications. So therefore, that's why you know, given this one is not acting as the planning authority, you're acting as council because of the wording in the covenant. It's a decision for council, but we are not party to this covenant. The covenant is between the original or the landowners as part of the.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And also, with what Councillor Gregson said with regards to being heard, there are two sides of these decisions that have to be heard, or need to be heard, or should be heard. So, you know, like someone's going to be upset and someone's not. It's just not, it's not an easy decision to sit here and do that. And like I congratulate and thank Councillor McQueenie for very extensive, I lost words today, but research, thank you, on this particular one. But I'm sitting here with a bird's eye view of this particular area, and the amount of development within and around that particular area, I can't see why. I mean, there's no the natural values. They're not. They're almost non-existent, so to speak. But this particular area is pretty much fully developed anyway. So I'm just sort of at a bit of a quandary. It's not a very easy one. It's a very tricky one. And anyway, I'll reserve.
Just a couple of things that come to mind and perhaps a question through you, Mayor, to planners or council on the planning, I'm not sure. Is the intent of the motion to allow the neighbours to be able to comment through the planning process as to what is to be built? Is that their avenue of, which is talking about natural justice and procedural fairness, is that avenue that you're opening up for them?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, two things. First of all, we already did open that up. Now we shut it down if we make this decision as per the recommendation, versus this new motion, which we've been advised is completely appropriate too. So yes, I think that there are issues in community confidence that go particularly to the fact because we asked your opinion and now we're not going to do it because there's another avenue that's now being adopted. I don't have a view on what the lot 3 is already subdivided. This isn't about whether it should happen or not. This is about process. And I don't think we should be throwing, I mean, sort of Councillor Edwards' comment, but in another way, I think we are throwing ourselves into people's business here when we don't need to, because we are not a party to this and they could well institute, you know, contested legal processes. And we have decided, because we don't have to under the alternate motion that I've popped forward, that we want to be involved in it. And I don't see any benefit to council.
Just going a step further with that idea that that would give the neighbouring properties an opportunity to make a representation against what the owner of this lot that the covenant is over. If that development fell within the planning authority scheme, there wouldn't be an avenue for a representation. So if they're not applying for anything outside the planning scheme, as far as setbacks, the rules and regulations, it'll be a no permit. Am I correct in assuming that? And that will then, the owners won't have an avenue anyway.
I hear that again, because I didn't understand that.
Well, if it's a no permit application that meets all the requirements of the planning scheme, it won't come across and have to meet any performance criteria, and it won't attract representations.
If we knock a permit request back.
Councillor Young, can I remind you that we are in a formal meeting,
I'm
not
sorry,
a
I just
workship?
quite understand
That's
Mayor, what the deputy mayor's saying.
Good.
I almost got it,
Councillor
but not
Young,
quite.
please.
I still don't understand.
Anyway,
Yeah, that I'd like to hear what our planners are going to say.
Mr Bonner, are you able to comment on this? I'd appreciate it if you would, because I'm a wee bit confused around
So to you, Mayor,
this.
subsequent application for, say, buildings, I mean, if they meet the requirements of the planning scheme in regards to the acceptable solutions, like we've talked about earlier in this meeting, potentially could be a no permit required use, in which case there is no planning permit required and there's no notification to neighbours. If there's a subdivision application, it is likely that it would be a discretionary application and would be. There's no guarantees that a subsequent application to build on lots would be notified to neighbours. Depends on how they make that application.
Are there any other questions or comments in relation? Councillor Churchill, anyone that hasn't spoken at the moment, because we do have. Councillor Churchill, I think that's you, is that? You're the only one?
It's unusual, isn't it? Yes, thank you, Anne. I think we've heard a lot of opinions here, and that's fantastic. And I support Councillor McQueen's motion, but I think the good thing about this motion is that it provides the opportunity potentially for inclusion. Otherwise, it's an exclusive process, and we need to include not just the members of covenant. I mean, this property also has other neighbours that aren't subject to that covenant, and this process potentially gives them the ability. That's if it moves forward. It might go no further than it is now, but if it moves forward, it potentially gives a lot of parties the opportunity to at least express their views on it or their concerns on it and bring that to council for council to make the decision on through a normal planning process. And I think that's a very fair way to approach this.
I heard all the comments. We're concerned about the fact that I haven't had really any officers' advice around his motion, but I'm going to accept that. I think it's.
Excuse me, Mayor, that just may need to be corrected, because the substance of that motion has actually come through the legal advice that's been
I understand that. I understand
as the request of the last meeting.
I understand that, Councillor Churchill, but if I could just clarify, what my meaning is that there's no comment inside our agenda from our planning officers in relation to it, which we've always had with officers' recommendations and the like. So that's it. So, Councillor McQueenie, the General Manager, do you want to?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to continue the progress this matter, it may just well be worth, given that we haven't really interrogated or had a decent look at the amended alternative motion proposed by Councillor McQueenie, if we can just, we can't get it up on the screen, but if we can just read that out to council again, if that's okay.
Post of your spanner in the works. Yes, can we please adjourn this
Yeah.
for a minute? Can you please adjourn the meeting so we can actually have,
To seek further advice.
yeah.
I move the meeting be adjourned for 15 minutes.
Thank you, councillor Young. On that basis, I will adjourn this meeting of council until 3:20 to seek further advice on this matter. Thank you.
Sorry.